He says, I don't think you got no I. Only Hashem says, Anochi Hashem Echad. Only I is Hashem. You didn't get the message. You better go back. And he went back. Anyways, they were a bit tough on each other. Anyways, but this is one of the most fundamental teachings of Chassidut, to connect with our neshama. And our neshama, our godly soul, doesn't know I. It's like it only knows Hashem, only knows the goal, only knows the purpose. It doesn't know about what do I need for myself, what is my gain. This kind of thinking is the physical side, our ego side, always trying to figure out why am I doing it, what's the reason, what's the gain, do I really feel like doing it, or do I really understand why I'm doing it, am I really getting a benefit from it? This kind of thinking, which is it's basically thinking of the physical side. The neshama, the godly side, is so devoted to Hashem, it doesn't care, it doesn't even think about whether I understand, whether I feel like doing it. The godly soul knows Hashem says, that's it, I'm ready to do it. It just wants to be connected to Hashem, wants to have dveikus all the time, and wants to have intimacy with Hashem. I want to be connected, I don't want to do anything, even the smallest thing that will disconnect me. So, this is what the Jews said, we learned last week's parsha, we will understand, we will do. That was the commitment of Am Yisrael, which Hashem was very impressed. It says in the Talmud that Hashem said to the angels, who is the one who told my children, who told my children the secret of this Naaseh, of we're going to do, and then we're going to ask. And then we're coming now to Parashat Truma next week, and when we're talking about the menorah, the candelabra, right? So there we know that the menorah had 7 sticks, which represent 7 types of neshamot, of souls, which we're going to talk about hopefully today. How could it be that there are so many souls if we all come from one source? How come there are so many types of souls? But the menorah, the candle symbolizes the neshamas. And this is also what we're saying now, that the neshama is like a candle, because the candle always tries to go up and tries to depart from the physicality. And if you're not going to put enough oil, the moment the oil is going to be gone, the candle's going to be gone, the light's going to be gone, because it just wants to depart from its physicality. If you want it to stay here, you have to keep on holding on to it. And this is the neshama. The neshama wants to be connected with Hashem all the time. He wants to depart. He wants to have dveikus in Hashem. So in the menorah, there was a shape of kaftorim, which was a shape of apples. If you look on the picture, or if you study, it was apples. According to Kabbalah, apples have a very special meaning. We know, if anybody's familiar with things, we say Sudas, we say if you ever came across that line, the field of the holy apples. Like when Yitzchak saw Yaakov, he said, you smell like from when Yaakov came instead of Esau, it says, I smelled the smell of the apples of the Garden of Eden. So what was so significant about the apples? It says so special about the apples is that the Garden of Eden is called the apple garden because it's not because it says in the Talmud that the apples have a special nature, that when the apple tree grows, the fruit comes before the leaves. Now, we actually just learned in the Gemara, I think it was Gemara Sukkah, the commentary says that it's not really all the apple trees, but there is a certain kind of apple tree that the Gemara is talking about. It's referred to in Shir HaShirim, that it's comparing Am Yisrael to Katap. I don't remember the exact verse, Kataploch B'Atzayayar, something like that. So, Ben Abanot. So it's we're like the apple tree on that specific kind, that the fruit comes before the leaves. And what's the meaning of the fruit? What's the meaning of the leaves? So we know Tu B'Shvat, we learn what's the idea of the fruit. The fruit is action. The tree has a lot in the tree, but the fruit is the bottom line, is the action. A tree is like a person is growing, and there is learning, there is atmosphere, there is ruach, there's a lot of things. But the fruit is the bottom line, is the mitzvot. So the leaves symbolizes the learning about the mitzvah. The leaves surround the fruit, but the fruit is the action. So normally in all the trees, the leaves come before the fruit. First there's the learning and then there's the doing. But with the apple tree, first is the fruit, with that specific kind, there's one kind. First is the fruit and then the leaves. And that shows that the commitment of the tzaddikim, of the righteous people, that they are ready to do the mitzvah before even they understand the reason. And that's why it's special, the way how we symbolize the Jewish soul in the menorah with the shape of an apple, because that shows the greatness of the Jewish soul, that we are so selfless and we're so committed to Hashem and to the truth that we're ready to do even before we understand. And this is the whole greatness when we came to Matan Torah, and this also this week's parsha at the end of Parsha Mishpat. That's actually in Parsha Yitro it says Nishma. It says maybe just one of them, I don't remember, Naseh or Nishma. Anyways, in the end of this week's Naseh. At the end of this week's parsha, that's where it's talking, the Shvi, the last part, it talks about the days before the giving of the Torah, and there it says that we said Naseh v'Nishma, we will do it, we will understand. And so we said we'll do before we understand, and that's the greatness of ours, that we are allowing our neshama, our godly side, to rule over ourselves, that we do before we understand. But what's interesting is that there's also the second part of nishma, of understanding, because the goal is that we should not be serving Hashem only with our godly side, also with our physical side. Because Hashem created us for a reason. Everything has a purpose. It's not like Hashem wants us to every day force ourselves to do what Hashem said because our neshama, because we have one side of ours, the godly soul, that is like the apple that just wants to do. Hashem wants to be also the nishma, the understanding, which is the idea of Parshat Mishpatim, the logical mitzvot, to also learn with our logic and appreciate the mitzvot. But we always have to remember what's the foundation, what's the priority, and what's secondary. That the base of Judaism has to be based on the godly soul, on the commitment to Hashem. And secondary, Hashem wants us to get fully involved in the mitzvah, that it shouldn't be like it shouldn't be superficial, it shouldn't be like we're forcing ourselves constantly, that we don't really connect with it deep inside. It's not internalized, it's not the pnimiyut. That's why the Elam Mishpatim Shatzim Lifnehem. What's Lifnehem? It says in Kabbalah, Lifnehem is the Pnimiyutam, within. Lifnehem is from the word Pnimiyut. Panim is from the word Pnimiyut. It's to internalize the Torah, the mitzvah, that we have the concept of Mishpatim, the learning. That's what Hashem would do. We have a mitzvah to learn. Judaism could have been a religion of just do what Hashem says, which is the greatest thing. Let me just tell you all the time. Hello? It's never go to sleep. Hello? Yeah, we'll do it next week, okay? Yeah, we'll talk after. I'm in a little class, okay? Okay, sure. So this is, but Hashem wants that it shouldn't stay there in just commitment, which is the greatest thing. Just nullify yourself before Hashem and do what Hashem says. Hashem wants the second step, the step of the involvement of the physical soul. So this is the basics of Chassidut. He talks a lot about it later, but now in this chapter we're now focusing just on this part of ourselves, the godly soul that is committed, that just wants to do what Hashem says. And there is So now we're going to get in depth a little bit about the second soul, the godly soul. We learned, the last thing we learned was last week, that our neshama comes to the level of wisdom of Hashem, from the Chokhmah of Hashem, and wisdom, and Hashem and His wisdom are one. He brings over here the davar ze en bicholet adam la'avino b'yochul. We cannot understand what is this whole thing, that Hashem and His wisdom are one. we know that Hashem is beyond any type of definition. God is beyond any definition. The Rambam writes a lot about it. He says, if we say that God is made out, is wisdom, for example, so then that means that God has a creator, because anything that has a composition of different details there has to be a source that made that composition. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is, if you're combined from different details, there's obviously a limit. There's a certain limit over here, and Hashem is infinite. So this is one of the biggest Kabbalistic debates that was there years ago, generations ago, that the greatest Kabbalistics questioned what the Rambam, what Maimonides wrote. And basically the Arizal explained that it's not really a problem to define God as one who is one with his wisdom. So this comes, we look in Tanakh, we find two contradicting verses. In one place it says, God is not man. It says, Kilo Adamu, God is not man. But in other places, it says, when the prophet who saw the image of God saw the image of man. So what is that supposed to mean? Like, it's a contradiction. One time it says God is not man, one time it says image of man. So, when we say image of man, what is man? Adam means an image. What does that mean when God created Adam in the first Torah portion, Bereshit? It says God created man in his image. What does it mean in his image? That doesn't have an image. So, in simple words, okay, we'll try to make it very simple. God is beyond any definition. God is infinite, is beyond any limit, and we don't know anything about God. We just know what He is not. It's called Yediyat HaShlila. We don't know what He is. We know what He's not. We know He's not limited. We know He's not anything that we know. He's not wisdom. He's not emotion. He's not this and not that. Not limited. He's not physical. Not spiritual. He's nothing that we know. He's not. We just know what He is not. We don't know what He is. He's beyond our understanding. Well, God decided. Now, this is not something that Hashem needed to do. God decided, if you look at it, there's a book called Book of Creation, Sefer Yetzirah, which is, I think it's from traditionally Avraham Avinu is the one who wrote it. In Sefer Yetzirah it says that when God decided to create the world, He first formed what we call 10 sefirot, 10 levels of power. And Hashem used those 10 sefirot as tools to create the world. Okay? He didn't have to do it, but He decided to do it that way. He decided to create the world with the 10 sefirot and the 22 letters of the alphabet. That's the 32 altogether. And then He created the world parallel to the spiritual, to those sefirot. What was the purpose of it? The purpose of it was that we should be able to understand God. Because God Himself we don't understand. But God created those levels who are godly vessels, okay? And we're able to understand them. The reason why we can understand is because we were created similar, in a similar way. Okay? So let's try to clarify. The first thing is when we called Adam, according to Kabbalah, Adam literally means Adama, which means earth, that we were created from earth. But the Shalach Kaddish says Adam has a deeper meaning. Adam is from the word image, like Dimyon, image. We were created in the image of the 10 Sefirot. And those 10 Sefirot are called, in Kabbalah, in Tanakh, Adam HaElyon, the upper man. We're called the lower man, this is called the Adam HaElyon. There's two men. There's the upper man and the lower man. What does man mean? In Hebrew it's called Adam, means an image, because we're parallel to each other. But the way we are parallel, it's like image. It's like when you look in the mirror. When you look in the mirror and you see that person in the mirror, you know that person in the mirror is nothing. It's an image. You are real. This is just an image. If you compare yourself, which are a real person who could do so much, who have real intellect, real emotions, compare yourself to this picture. A picture in the mirror is nothing. So we are incomparable to those 10 sefirot, those godly levels that God's created. We are. It's like a certain image. Like, to give a little understanding to this Chassidut, imagine we know what sweet is, right? Imagine there could be different levels of sweetness. Imagine you eating an apple that is sweet, right? But then there's somebody who hears a nice music. It's really sweet. Try to compare the sweetness of nice melody, nice tune, nice music, piece of music, to sweetness of the apple. Obviously, sweetness of the apple is very physical, very coarse, and this is like very refined. Then imagine somebody with sweetness from learning, or sweet from understanding the concept, or sweetness from doing kindness and helping. So you can't compare. It's different levels altogether. So we understand that we can have the same idea, the same. I think they want to go in. Okay, let's see first. Imagine, so you can have the same kind of thing, but in different levels. Like, you imagine you have a car, a real car, and then you have a toy car. They both have wheels, they both have, but this is real, it's not. You know, so we are. Okay, it's not to take away from our greatness. Obviously, we have intellect, we have emotions, but everything that we have is parallel to something that exists in the spiritual, but over there it's at a much infinite way, much greater, much more spiritual, much more powerful. But we have a little taste of it, a little tiny bit of it. One of the ways to see how it's so different, we know that when the sun is in the east, right, in the morning, and then an hour later, the sun is how many miles away? Just 1 hour. I don't know exactly how many miles, but probably thousands of miles. And the shade here moved tiny drop. So in other words, it's to compare how it is between the physical and the spiritual. That here, a little tiny bit over there means so much more. This is just a reflection. It's just so much greater. So there's many ways to explain this idea, but why did God do it? So Yov, in his book, Job, writes, "For my flesh I could see God." God gave us the ability to see Him, and He doesn't say ereh, He says echazeh. What's the difference between lirot velachazot? Both means to see, but lirot is in Hebrew, lachazot is in Aramaic. You know, you look in the Gemara, chazi means to see. We use that word in Tehillim, lachazot b'na'am Hashem, but it's really a word from Aramaic. It's a word of translation. So it says in Kabbalah, whenever you see that it's using a word of translation, it means it's like translated. It's not really the real thing. When it's written a word in Hebrew, it means that you could, like it says lirot, means that you could really see it. When it says lachazot in Aramaic, it means it's a translation. You're not really seeing it. So Yov says, "Mipsari echzeh Eloka." For my flesh, I could see God, but it's a translation. You don't really see God, but you have the ability to understand about godly levels. But again, it's very important to always remember that when we say that we're able to understand God because God is in our image, we're not talking about the essence of God. We're talking about godly levels that God created, and they're called godly because they are one with Him. They're nullified to Him. Okay? It's like you look at, think about your body, right? Your body, if you think about what's my essence, the essence of each one of us is the soul. But the way my body is with my soul is that my body is one with my soul. My soul is, if I want to give tzedakah with my hand, it's my soul giving tzedakah through my hand. My hand is united with my soul to the extent that I could say this is part of me, it's one with me, but it's really two separate things. There's my soul and there's my body, but the body and the soul become like one, even though it's two different entities. So the same idea with the sefirot, that the sefirot is like, so to speak, the body of Hashem. In other words, it's not, Hashem is beyond those sefirot, but Hashem is using those vessels to do chesed, to do gebura, to punish, or to do reward. But even though Hashem is beyond those sefirot and is infinitely higher, but when He dwells, like He dwelled in the Mishkan, He dwells in it in a way that becomes one entity. Okay, so I'll give you another example of Parashat Truma, when we're talking about Hashem resting in the Mishkan, in the Holy of Holies. So when Hashem rests in the Holy of Holies, there was a mixture of infinity and finite. How do we see it? Because the Aron, this is next week's Parsha, had a measure of 5 amot. 5 amot is about 2.5 meters. Now the entire Kodesh HaKodashim, the entire Holy of Holies, the entire room was 15 meters, which is 10 amot. Now, if you would measure the Aron itself, you would get a measure. Now, if you would measure from the wall till the Aron, you get 5, and from there, another 5, as if the Aron didn't take any space. So that was one of the greatest miracles that the Talmud talks about, that Makom HaAron Eino Min HaMidah, that the space of the ark didn't take space. If you would take just the ark itself, you could measure it. But if you would measure the entire room, you would get 10 amot. You would measure from the wall till the Aron, and then from the other side of the wall, from the other wall till the Aron, each side you get 5 and 5. Didn't make any sense. Because if till here is 5, till here is 5, and this is 2.5, everything should be 12.5. So in the Aron there was a mixture of finite and infinity, because Hashem dwelled there. And that was the place of the Shekhinah. Hashem dwelled specifically in that place, and from that place the God light goes to the entire world till today, because the Shekhinah is still there till once the temple was built, Hashem rested there, and the Kedusha doesn't move from there. That's why if we're not allowed to go on in certain areas of the Temple Mount, because we need to wait for the Mashiach to come and to have the ashes of the red cow. So and look, he was there. You can't. Many people don't even go because they're not sure if they're going to go to the wrong area, and even if they know for sure, but you never know. Like there's, I'm not saying anything. I'm not talking politics, but there was a story the other day where the Arabs started. I forgot how you call it. Demonstrating. Yeah. And then they were running away from the Arabs. They ended up going to an area that they shouldn't have been there. So it's not so simple. But why is it? Because the holiness is still there in the Holy of Holies, mostly, but then also. So why did I bring that example? Because that was an example of a place where God and the physical world became united. That the actual place of the Holy of Holies became united with the greatest essence of God, with the infinity of God, the infinite godliness, the infinite energy of Hashem. Which even that is not the essence of Hashem, because Hashem is beyond anything that we could talk about, that we could describe. But the light or the energy of Hashem, the infinite energy of Hashem, is the greatest level that we know about. Rested in the Aron in a way that became one. And that's the way the infinity of God rests in the 10th Sefirah, in that image of man. So we know again that it's not God. That's what it says in Tanakh. Adam, lo Adam. We always have to remember God is not the 10th Sefirot, and that's why that's the whole chidush. We already spoke about this. We know that the whole great understanding of Hashem Hu Elokim, because Hashem is the essential name of God, which represents the infinity of God. The Elokim represents the Sefirot. Elokim, the one is also the Gematria Kos, because each one of the Sefirot is like a cup. It's like 10 places where Hashem dwells. It's like when imagine you have 10 cups, each cup has a different color. And in all these 10 cups, different colors, you have water. You pour water, same water, white water, pure water in 10 cups. So inside the cup it's the same water. But when you look from the outside of the cup, you see green, yellow, right? So this is the way God works with the Sefirot. It's the same infinity of God in all the Sefirot, but when Hashem is dwelling in the sphere of Chesed, so what comes out from there is the attribute of Chesed. From the vessel of Gvura comes attribute of Gvura. So it's the infinity of God conducting with the world in 10 different ways. Chachma, Bina, all the 10 sefirot that we know about. So this is the basics of Kabbalah, what we're learning now. This the understanding how God runs the world, which again we're saying on a very simple level, so everybody can understand. But we understand. This is basically the answer for the question that they asked on the Rambam and the Maimonides. We understand that God forbid, we're not saying that God is the Sefirot. God is that we're not trying to define God, because we know God is beyond any definition. But at the same time, we know that God created those Sefirot, and Hashem is united with them like a soul with a body, and even more than that, because we could only give examples of ourselves. We know our soul and the body are one. Whatever I'm going to do, it's all my soul doing it. Every movement of my body is the soul doing it through the body. So, but still we know the soul and the body are two different entities. There it's even a higher level of unity that we cannot even imagine. The only way we could imagine it is, like we saw in the luchot, in the tablets, that the letters were engraved. And what does it mean engraved? When you engrave something, the letters and the tablet are one thing. When you write, so you have the ink and the paper, so different entities. And the luchot symbolizes the unity of God with the world, or with the Sefirot, that it's in a way of engraved, that it's like one entity, that we can't even imagine. It's beyond our understanding, but we just have this example, that it's called Otiyot HaChakikah, that when you engrave in letters, in the tablets, the letters are made out of the tablets. It's one entity, and that's the way Hashem is united with the Sefirah. So, why did Hashem do it? Because there is different explanations why Hashem created the world. And all explanations, we know Hasidus always teaches us that whenever we find there's a concept of Eilu V'Eilu Develokim Chaim, all the opinions are true. You know, like when you have it's called American test. Choice, when you have choices. In Israel they call it American test. I don't know if it's called American. Multiple choice test. I don't know what they call it. So you have the answer, all the answers are right. So that's the way Hasidus, it's based on the story in the Gemara. The Bet Shammai Bet Hillel both are true, and that when Mashiach will come, the halacha will change to Bet Shammai. Now the halacha is like Bet Hillel. How, if one is right, so how could we change? If one is wrong, so it's wrong. Well, what does it mean? So all opinions are true. The question is, and it's a different question, what do we do? Because we could only follow one opinion when it comes to action. But all opinions are true. Nobody's wrong. The Sephardim are right and Ashkenazim are right. Like the story, of these two guys who came to the Rav with a big argument, a big fight. And the first guy said his side of the story, and the rabbi said, "You're right." And then the other side argued and said their side of the story, and the rabbi said, "You're right." And then the wife of the Rav said, "Then how could they both be right?" She said, "You're also right." You know the story, yeah? So the idea is that all opinions are right, because when it's in the physical world, you can have more than one right. It's either yes or no. But in the spiritual, in level, even in our loud logic, we sometimes understand both sides. We understand. Sometimes you see two people and they both argue and both have different opinions, and you can understand both opinions. Because in the world of intellect, we can understand two opposite opinions. In the world of action, there has to be one, either yes or no. What do we do? So, if it's true in the world of intellect, we don't know anything above intellect, but there is obviously much higher levels than intellect that exist in the spiritual world. So, all opinions are true. Anyway, back to our point. So, there's different explanations. I'm not going to elaborate all of them, but just to say them. So, the one reason that Hasidus talks a lot about is the Rav Tachtonim. Hashem wanted to dwell in the lowest of the low. And this is what happened in the Mishkan, that the Shekhinah dwelled in the physical tabernacle. So this is one reason why Hashem created the world. Another reason is Hashem Teva Tov Leitiv, the nature of good is to do good. Hashem wanted to do good, and in order to do good you have to have who to give to do Lehitiv, who to do good to. And the third reason is written in Kabbalah, is what we're talking about right now, is in order that we should, I don't remember the exact words, but in English it's in order that we should know about Him, about His greatness. Sheneida, Shlemuto, something like that. We should be able to know about Hashem. That's another reason. Now, how could Hashem create the world and we should know about it? Hashem is the creator. We're the creations. The creations could never understand the creator. It's impossible. So for that, Hashem created those sfirot, which are considered part of God, but then again, they are part of God, but they're not part of God. On the one hand, the sfirot, those tools, are not part of God. God is beyond them, but God united with them, and they are considered godly. They consider the sfirot are considered godly energies, and when we understand them, it means that we're learning about God. So when God created us, what does it mean that He created us in His image? Let's create man in our image. We're talking about the image of the sfirot. Also, the angels were created in that image, and the world was created in that image. In order that we should be able to learn about the sfirot and the godly world and what's the purpose of it. That's, again, this is also a big thing to talk about, but just in a nutshell, it's part of the way how we are able to become more spiritual and to become more connected with Hashem is by learning about the spiritual world. It makes us a little bit less physical, a little bit more connected with our neshama. And in order to enable that, God created the world in a way that there is a spiritual world parallel to the physical world, and everything that exists in our body, there is parallel to that in the spiritual. And that's what the Eov said, my flesh, I could see God. Everything I understand about my own flesh, my own body, my own soul, everything that's parallel to the spiritual. Obviously we need to have the guidance of our teachers. We can't just think of on our own what is what, but everything has a parallel. And like we know in the Torah, every story in the Torah has a spiritual meaning. Everything, the Shabbat Kaddish writes that every story of the Torah begins in the spiritual and then goes to the physical. It's not that the story is really talking about something physical that happened and then there's also a spiritual interpretation. The Shabbat Kaddish says, Torah medaberet be'alyonim v'romezet b'tachtonim. The Torah is first, it's really talking about something spiritual because the Hashem gave us the Torah. And then everything also happened in the physical. So it's this is a little taste of it. Anyway, so what the Rambam writes, that God, Shehu Amadav, Hu Hayodeh, Hu Hayadua, he says Hashem and knowledge are one. And all the great Kabbalists ask, how could you say Hashem knowledge? We say HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't say HaChacham Baruch Hu. What's Kadosh Baruch Hu? It means holy, exalted, because He's beyond anything. So he says it's true. But once Hashem contracted the infinity into those sfirot, and then we could say that even after Hashem created those levels, Hashem united Himself with them, that they're one with Hashem. Complete nullification. Now like us, that we don't have that nullification because we feel ourselves like a separate entity. We recognize Hashem created us, and we don't feel every second that we're part of Hashem. We don't feel like our body feels to the soul. We don't feel the same with Hashem. So let's read a little bit inside. We're going to read the footnote now. I was thinking if we should read it inside or not, but I guess we'll just read it. It's a small letters, you see, on page 6 on the bottom pages. The rabbis of the Kabbalah ended up agreeing with the Rambam, as it says in the book of Pardes from Rav Moshe Cordovero, who was a student of the Arizal. What the Rambam writes is true, that it's true to say that God is one with the level of Chachma, which is the first sphere, it's called Chachma, with wisdom, after many contractions of the infinity of God, till He came down to the sphere, the first three spheres, which is Chabad, Chachma v'Novadat, of Atzilut, of the world of Atzilut, which is the first godly world. But this would not be true above the world of Atzilut. Above the world of Atzilut, above the world, there is infinity of God that is beyond anything. You see a note over here. It's in English over here. You have a note in the English side. You have the right page? Page 5 over there? Yeah, so you see there's a note on the side. Yeah, in that. Well, I'm reading over there. As it says in other place, she'en sof baruchu, that infinity of God, that really Hashem Himself is exalted and is beyond any definition, even the highest level that we know about, which is Chabad, that's intellect, even above that. For Hashem, intellect is like action. It says, literally means that Hashem created the world with wisdom. But Kabbalah has a very deep learning from this pasuk, If we think about our body, and now that we understand our body, we understand that everything is parallel in the spiritual world. So in ourselves, in our soul, there is 5 levels, 5 general levels. The highest level is intellect. The second level is emotion. In Hebrew is sechel. The second level is regesh, emotion. Third level is machshava, thought. And the fourth level is speech, dibur. And the fifth level is action, maaseh. So the highest level, the highest level that we know about ourselves is the intellect, and the lowest level is action, right? That's what we spoke about last week. How people think what's big deal if you do a mitzvah with action, because in our world, action is like nothing. It's like you just did it. You just moved. You just did something technical, physical. There's nothing deep about it. So by action is very little. Even an animal could do action, could walk, could move, could. Action is like very, very low. The least energy of our soul is expressed is there in action. Then speech is higher, thought is even higher, feelings even higher, and intellect is even higher. And we're going to learn chapter 4 that basically the lower 3 are clothing, and the top 2 is more, we call it essence, even though it's not really our essence. Intellect and emotions are really more ourselves, our intellect and emotions. And thought, speech, and action is garments. We think what we understand and what we feel, so that's a garment. A thought is a garment for ourselves, that we think to ourselves what we feel, what we understand. Speech is a garment. What's a garment? A garment is like an intermediary, the way we appear to other people, or to ourselves. A thought is to ourselves. Speech is to communicate our understanding and our emotions to others on more of a spiritual level. And action is communicating our understanding and feeling more in a very physical level. So in simple words, our highest level in our personality, in our soul, is intellect, and the lowest is action. And we want to describe how Hashem is so exalted from us that we say that Hashem kulam bechokhma asita. For Hashem, the highest level, which is intellect, is just like maaseh, just like action. So that's to show how the intellect, our intellect, or even the intellect of the Sfirot, which is so high, it's incomparable to Hashem. There is, we say, there's other places, if we pay attention, we have other places where we say it. For one of the places we say it, Oseh Pele. You ever pay attention? What does it mean, Oseh Pele? It's also to describe how Hashem is so great that when you see wonders, Pele, for Hashem is just like maaseh, like a little action, like it's not a big deal, because He's so great and so exalted. There was once a chassid who learned a lot of Kabbalah, and somebody, another chassid, came over to him and said, "Could you explain to me who God is?" He says, "I can't explain God. I can't define God." He says, "But you know so much. Maybe you could." He says, "No, I can't. Finally, he squeezed him. He bugged him. He said, "Give me some kind of definition." So the moment he opened his mouth to start explaining, he says, "No." He says, "Once you start talking, it's already not God." It's not. Hashem is beyond anything that we could define. And now in the Malachim, or the highest, nobody, even the highest level possible, it's all part of creation. Even those Sfirot that we consider godly, but really Hashem created them. And Hashem created them in a way that as He created them, they're united with them. And what does that mean? Like we learned 2 weeks ago, that really the whole world is united with Hashem. But there's different levels of unity. There's unity where you feel the unity, you don't feel the unity. We don't feel the unity, even though really, we know that there's one of the teachings of Chassidut, the Rebbe said it in the first, when he took on the leadership, it was a very powerful farbrengen. So he emphasized, we know Avraham Avinu was the first Jew, and he was also the first one to teach the world about God. And in the place where it says that he did it, and we know the story, that he opened up a restaurant, a hotel in the middle of the desert, and all the travelers passed by, and when they would come to his hotel, he would invite them, give them meat and wine, and according to some things, he even had an orchard, and he offered them fruits and all kinds of things. And finally, at the end, he said, bless God for the food you ate and the wine you drank and everything else. So some of them said, okay. And obviously some of them said, no, we don't know God. We only know you. We want to thank you. He says, if you want to thank me, I don't give for free. And so I'm going to charge you. So again, some of them said, okay, we'll thank God. And some of them were so stubborn, okay, we'll pay. But then he showed them a big bill. He said, okay, a cup of wine may cost $1, but not in the desert. In the desert, it's $10. And the piece of meat in town is $1. Here's $10. And then when they saw that they didn't have to owe so much money, they gave in and they said, okay, we'll bless God. So this is what Avraham did, to teach the whole world, to break the cliff of the world, to make everybody recognize of God. So what's interesting, this is what the Rebbe was talking about, that when the Pasuk teaches us, it says, Vayikra Hashem, B'Shem Hashem. And that's what we learned, that he called out the name of God. It says in the Medrash, Atikra Vayikra Ela Vayakri. Not that he called in Hashem, he made others, Vayakri. He made others call in the name of Hashem. But then what is in the end of the Pasuk? It says, Kel Olam. So he says, it doesn't say Kel HaOlam, it says Kel Olam. Because normally we think, what is Hashem is Kel HaOlam, is God of the world. But if we say that, it's like we're saying, like we spoke about before, that there is a body and a soul, there are two different entities. Just the body is nullified to the soul. It just feels that the soul is the one who gives all the energy, and the soul is the one that rules. So there is this concept of recognizing there's a God, which is a very high level. There's a God and there's a world, but the world runs by God. God is conducting the world, and we should be obeying everything Hashem says. But that's not what he said. He said Kel Olam. He didn't say Kel Haolam, Kel Olam, which means that God and the world are one entity. And this is the whole concept, what we spoke about before, Hashem hu Elokim. The Elokim, which is Gematria Kos, which shows on the Sfirot, and God the way He is in the Sfirot, and Hashem is one. And this is something, this is a much higher level of understanding. This is not just already to recognize Hashem created the world at a high level. To recognize Hashem didn't only create the world back then, He's also creating the world every moment, and everything is Hashem is running the world every moment. That's also a high level. But Chassidus teaches us even deeper. Not only that Hashem and the world, two separate entities, Hashem is controlling, that the world and Hashem are one entity. So what's the difference in us and the Sfirot? The truth is, it's the same thing. The Sfirot are part of Hashem, we're part of Hashem, but the difference is in how we feel, our feelings. We don't feel that. We don't feel that we are one with Hashem. The highest level that we could reach as human beings, unless we're tzaddikim, is that appreciation that God creates us and He runs it and runs the world, but we still feel, no matter what, we feel ourselves as separate entities. We just have emunah, but we don't feel it. But the Sfirot, that's what defines the fact that we said the Sfirot are part of Hashem, means that they feel that. They don't feel themselves as a separate entity. Therefore they're not called creations. We spoke about it last week, 2 weeks ago, that what defines creation is when someone feels, okay, I'm a creation, there's a creator with two different things. But the Sfirot have such a level of unity with Hashem that they don't have that feeling.
But the spirit could be used both in the physical world and the spiritual world. We must make the choice to decide, and that's a free will.
Everything is
as to what we want to apply it to.
Right. But what we just said, that everything is parallel. So the spirit exists in ourselves, in our soul, and exists also in the physical side. The spirit are basically 3 levels of intellect, 6 levels of emotion, and then the 10th one is thought, speech, and action. So it's the 5 levels that we said. The 10th Sefirot, that basically the first 3 is the intellect, which is the first level we mentioned before. Then the next 6, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, is emotions, and then Malchut is action. The king says, and people do, and people. Malchut is how the it comes out to Lepoal, comes out to action. What you think, what you speak, that's Malchut. So the 10 Sefirot are really the 5 levels that we are, and that exist in us, exist in the world, and we have that job to connect with this. He says, the Rambam writes, you and me can never understand. What does that mean? That God created those Sefirot, and yet they're one with Him, and God and the intellect are one. But the Rambam says we have to say that, because if we think that God and the wisdom are the moment, this is the beginning of the Rambam. The first sefer of the Rambam is Sefer Hamadah, and in the yeshivas they skip it because it's Kabbalah. They start with the second sefer. They don't start with the Mada, but they start with Ava. So even I remember there's a new sefer about the Rambam. I think they already finished the whole set. I don't remember the name of it. Amazing book on the Rambam that they. It's like brown books. I forgot what it's called. Frankel, I think. They started with the second one because they at the end.
76.
And I don't know, by now they probably did it already, the first chilek.
I think they later.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So the Frankel start with the second because in yeshiva they don't use it. They start with the second one because it's Kabbalah. The Rebbe spoke about it that if the Rambam shows that as the first sefer, it's supposed to be the first one. And also, not only that, the Rambam also calls it the Ilchot Yisodat Torah, the laws of the foundation of Torah. Anybody who builds a building knows you put the foundation first. And then the first parak, he starts, which is Rashi Tevot Yud Kei Vav Ki, Yesoda Yisodot B'Amud HaChochmah. So that's the foundation of foundations to know about God, and Avas Hashem, Niras Hashem, and the only way to have love for Hashem and offer Hashem, you have to understand the godless of Hashem. And the first 4 chapters of Rambam, he talks about the Master Berkov, Master Bereshis. He gives a little taste of understanding the greatness of Hashem. He says this is the foundation. So the Rebbe was talking about very strongly that we should realize the importance of learning about the greatness of Hashem, realizing that the Rambam is directing us to start off with that. So, but we're scared of it. We think maybe it's for this is all itself is a whole different discussion. That if whether it's okay to learn it. In a nutshell, the Rambam writes that the rabbis instructed us in the Talmud. Letayel, lo letayel bepardes. Letayel means to stroll, and there's a difference between. In other words, today it's different, but the idea of taking a stroll is basically to just walk around with nobody guiding you. You're just walking. So that was the problem that we were told by the rabbis, that we cannot take a stroll. We can't just start learning Kabbalah on our own. We have to be guided by the rabbis, because we could understand these things are very refined, and actually what we learn today could give us an understanding why it could be so dangerous to learn Kabbalah, because we made it very clear that when we say God and the wisdom are one, it means that God is really beyond it, and it's just Hashem is dwelled or in it. But if someone is taking book of Kabbalah and start reading about this, you could start thinking of God with physical terms, which is very dangerous. It could bring to atheism and to kfira. It could be very dangerous. Even you learn the Torah, people start thinking, oh, God gets angry, and all of that. When we send them up, for example, God gets angry. Doesn't mean God gets angry. It means that God is enclosed in the vessel of Gevura and God could be enclosed, but God is beyond. Like any kind of terminology is already vessel. It's not God Himself. God is putting on the clothing of stringency, of chesed, or whatever it is. So it's a very delicate thing, and but it's very important. But at the same time, it's very important to learn about it because it's giving us the foundation of Judaism. In order for us to have emotions towards Hashem, you can't have emotion if you don't have any understanding. That's what we do every day in the Tefillah. We meditate on the greatness of Hashem and the creation, the Bria, and the Malachim, and the angels, and the Sphere. We do talk about it. It's very important. But at the same time, we can't really understand it. We can never understand really how these things work. How Hashem is beyond any definition, but then Hashem is one with those definitions. This is something we can't understand. This is not. But this is part of our emunah. Okay, I think we're strong enough to
we solve that.